General Zextara stood in the center of his massive command ship, looking at the stars through the giant viewing window. His forearms were crossed behind his back as he watched his fleet move through space like deadly shadows. 400 ships surrounded his flagship, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The sight filled him with pride and satisfaction. The general had been fighting wars for over 300 years. In all that time, he had never lost a single battle. Every alien species he encountered followed the same boring pattern. First, they would try to resist with their primitive weapons. Then they would see the true power of the galactic hegemony. Finally, they would surrender and beg for mercy. It was always the same story, and Zextara was getting tired of how easy it had become. Today would be different, though. Today, they were going to deal with a species called humans. These creatures lived on a small blue planet in a system they called Sol. The humans had been causing trouble in the outer territories, attacking hegemony supply ships and freeing some of the client species that served the Empire. It was time to teach these bipedal mammals their place in the cosmic order. Commander Veltar approached from behind, his footsteps echoing in the vast command chamber. Veltar had served under Zextara for 50 years and knew better than to interrupt his general when he was thinking. But today was important, and the latest intelligence reports needed to be delivered. "Sir," Veltar said quietly, "we have received the final scout reports about the human homeworld." Zextara turned around slowly, his large purple eyes focusing on his aide. "Tell me what we are dealing with, Commander." Veltar activated his datapad and began reading. The humans have approximately 50 billion individuals living on their planet and various space stations. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. They still use chemical rockets for space travel and basic energy weapons for defense. Our intelligence suggests they have been spacefaring for less than 200 of their years. The general nodded with satisfaction. 200 years in space was nothing compared to the hegemony's 10,000-year history of galactic dominance. What about their military forces? They have assembled a defensive fleet of 37 ships around their homeworld, Veltar continued. The largest vessel appears to be what they call a battleship, roughly half the size of our smallest cruiser. They have no planet-destroying weapons, no energy shields, and no faster-than-light communication systems during battle. Zextara's mandibles clicked together in amusement. This was going to be even easier than he had hoped. 37 primitive ships against his fleet of 400 advanced warships. The humans might as well try to fight a hurricane with. Paper fans, have they been given the standard surrender terms? The general asked. Yes, sir. We transmitted the message 3 hours ago. They have been informed that they must surrender immediately, accept hegemony rule, and provide 50% of their planetary resources as tribute. We also explained that their military leaders would be taken as prisoners and their population would be relocated to serve as workers in our industrial sectors. Zextara walked to his command chair, a massive throne-like seat that elevated him above the rest of his bridge crew. The chair was made from the bones of a creature from his homeworld, polished to a bright shine. It reminded him of his heritage as a warrior and his duty to expand the hegemony's power throughout the galaxy. And what was their response? He asked, though he already knew what it would be. Every species initially refused the surrender terms. It was pride, nothing more. Once they saw a demonstration of hegemony firepower, they always changed their minds quickly. Veltar hesitated for a moment before answering. Sir, their response was unusual. The message came from someone called Admiral Jake Murphy. He said, and I quote, "Your surrender terms are rejected. We know what you did to the Centauri colonies. If you want Earth, you will have to come through." U.S.? The general leaned back in his chair and laughed. The sound echoed through the command center, causing several junior officers to look up from their stations. They think they can stop us? These primitive creatures actually believe they can resist the might of the galactic hegemony? There is more, sir, Veltar continued. Intelligence reports suggest that humans have been fighting wars among themselves for their entire recorded history. They appear to have a cultural obsession with combat and military strategy. Zexthara waved one of his hands dismissively. Every species fights among themselves before they mature enough for galactic civilization. The Altarians were the same, way before we conquered them. So were the crystalline beings of Kepler 442b. Internal warfare means nothing when facing superior technology. The general stood up and walked to the tactical display that dominated the center of his bridge. The holographic image showed the Sol system in perfect detail. The human homeworld, Earth, was a small blue dot surrounded by the tiny lights that represented their pathetic fleet. His own forces appeared as red symbols, overwhelming in their numbers and firepower. "Look at this, Veltar," Zexthara said, pointing at the display. "We have more ships in our vanguard alone than they have in their entire fleet. Our smallest frigate has more firepower than their largest battleship. This will not be a battle. This will be a demonstration." The communication officer, a young hegemony officer named Crystal, called out from his station. "Sir, we are receiving another transmission from the human fleet." "Put it on the main screen," Zexthara ordered. He wanted to see the face of this Admiral Murphy, who dared to refuse the generous surrender terms. The viewing screen shimmered and then displayed the bridge of a human ship. The general was surprised by what he saw. The humans were smaller than he had expected, with only 2 arms and primitive-looking technology surrounding them. But their leader, Admiral Murphy, stood straight and tall despite being clearly outmatched. His eyes showed no fear, only grim determination. "General Zexthara of the Galactic Hegemony," Murphy said, his voice carrying clearly through the communication system. "I assume you are the one responsible for the genocide of the Centauri colonies and the enslavement of the Rigel population." Zexthara was surprised that these humans knew about his previous campaigns, but he did not let it show on his face. "I am General Zexthara, Supreme Commander of the 7th Hegemony Fleet. You have one final chance to surrender peacefully. Submit to hegemony rule, and your species will be allowed to live as workers and servants. Continue to resist, and your planet will be reduced to ash and your people scattered across the galaxy as slaves." Admiral Murphy was quiet for a moment, and Zexthara thought the human might finally be realizing the hopelessness of his situation. But then Murphy smiled, and something about that expression made the general feel uncomfortable. "General, Murphy said, let me explain something about humans. We have a saying on Earth, freedom is not free. That means we understand that peace and liberty must sometimes be defended with blood and sacrifice. We know we cannot match your technology or your numbers, but we also know something you do not." "And what is that?" Zexthara asked. Though he was beginning to wish he had not opened this communication channel, Murphy's smile faded, replaced by an expression of cold determination. "We know how to die fighting. And we know that sometimes the only way to truly live is to be willing to die for something greater than yourself. You offer us slavery disguised as mercy. We choose freedom, even if it costs us everything." The communication ended abruptly, leaving Zexthara staring at a blank screen. For the first time in centuries, the general felt a small twinge of doubt. But he pushed the feeling aside. Words were just words. When the shooting started, these humans would break just like every other species had broken before them. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Show them what happens when primitives challenge the galactic hegemony." General Zexthara watched the tactical display as his fleet moved into attack formation. The human ships looked like tiny insects compared to his massive warships. Everything was going according to plan. His vanguard would destroy half the human fleet in the first wave, and the survivors would surrender within minutes. It was the same pattern he had seen hundreds of times before. "All ships report ready for combat, sir," Commander Veltar announced from his station. "The humans are maintaining their defensive positions around their homeworld." "Begin with a demonstration strike," Zexthara ordered. "Target their 3 largest ships. Use minimum power settings. We want to disable them, not destroy them completely. Once they see what our weapons can do, they will realize resistance is hopeless." The first wave of energy beams lanced out from the hegemony ships, brilliant streams of purple light that could melt through solid metal like butter. The beam struck the human ships exactly where they were aimed, hitting engine sections and weapon systems. Zexthara expected to see the human vessels go dark and drift helplessly in space. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships kept fighting. The lead human vessel, a ship called the UES Defiant, had taken a direct hit to its main engine. Half the ship was glowing red-hot from the energy strike, and atmosphere was venting into space through massive holes in the hull. But instead of shutting down, the ship turned toward the hegemony fleet and accelerated. "Sir," the weapons officer called out, "the human ship is moving directly toward us. They appear to be attempting a ramming attack." Zexthara stared at the display in confusion. "That is impossible. Their ship is severely damaged. They should be evacuating or surrendering." Captain Lisa Stone stood on the bridge of the Defiant as sparks flew from damaged control panels around her. Half her crew was dead or injured, but the survivors continued working at their stations despite the smoke and flames. The ship's artificial gravity had failed and everyone was floating, but they kept fighting. "Engineering, give me everything you have left," Stone shouted over the sound of alarms and explosions. "I need full power to weapons and engines." "Captain, the engine core is critical," came the reply from below. "If we push it any harder, the whole ship will explode." "Then we better make this count," Stone replied. She turned to her weapons officer, a young man named Danny Clark who was bleeding from a head wound but still working. "Target the largest alien ship. Concentrate all firepower on their weapon systems." The Defiant fired everything it had as it raced toward the hegemony flagship. The human weapons were primitive compared to alien technology, but they were aimed with deadly precision. Instead of trying to penetrate the alien armor, the humans targeted connection points, sensor arrays, and weapon mounting systems. Zexthara felt his ship shake as the human weapons found their marks. "How are they causing damage?" "Their weapons should be useless against our shields." "Sir, they are not trying to penetrate our defenses," Veltar reported, studying his tactical screen. "They are targeting specific weak points in our weapon systems. It appears they have been studying our technology and have identified vulnerable spots that our own engineers overlooked." The general watched in growing disbelief as more human ships followed the Defiant's example. Instead of retreating when damaged, they pressed their attacks even harder. A small human frigate called the Liberty had lost its entire front section to an alien energy beam, but the surviving crew had somehow turned the wreckage into a weapon, using the twisted metal. As a giant projectile, Captain Pete Collins commanded the Liberty from what remained of his bridge. The ship was dying around him, but he refused to give up. "All hands prepare for ramming speed. We are going to take that alien cruiser with us." "Sir, the evacuation pods are ready," his first officer reported. "We can still save most of the crew," Collins shook his head. "If we abandon ship now, that alien cruiser will survive to attack other human vessels. Our job is to protect Earth, and that means taking out as many of them as we can." He turned to address his remaining crew over the communication system. "Anyone who wants to evacuate has 30 seconds to get to the pods. No one will think less of you for choosing to live." Not a single person left their station. The Liberty struck the alien cruiser at full speed, its damaged hull cutting deep into the enemy ship's engine section. Both vessels exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up space for thousands of kilometers. The alien cruiser, 10 times larger than the human frigate, broke apart and drifted helplessly. Zexthara stood frozen at his command station, unable to believe what he was seeing. "They destroyed one of our cruisers with a damaged frigate. How is this possible?" "Sir, we are receiving reports from all combat zones," Veltar announced, his voice filled with confusion. "The humans are not following standard combat procedures. When their ships are disabled, they continue fighting. When they run out of ammunition, they use their ships as weapons. When their life support fails, they keep working until they die." On another part of the battlefield, Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster led a squadron of 12 human fighters against a massive alien dreadnought. The enemy ship was so large that it looked like a floating city, bristling with hundreds of weapon turrets. Any sane pilot would have avoided such a target, but Foster had identified something the aliens did not realize they had revealed. "All fighters, follow my lead," Foster transmitted to her squadron. "The big ship has a weakness. See those power conduits running along the hull? If we can hit them in the right sequence, we can cause a cascade failure in their main weapon systems." "Commander, that means flying directly through their defensive fire," one of her pilots replied. "That the chances of survival are practically zero." "I know," Foster answered calmly. "But if we do not take out those planet-killer weapons, they will. Use them on Earth. Our families are down there. Our children are down there. Are we going to let them die because we were afraid to take a risk?" The human fighters dove toward the alien dreadnought like tiny arrows fired at a mountain. The alien defensive guns opened up, filling space with deadly energy beams. One by one, the human fighters were destroyed, but each pilot made sure to hit their assigned target before dying. Foster's fighter was the last one left, as she approached the final power conduit. Her ship was damaged and losing altitude, but she held steady as alien weapons fire exploded around her. "This is for everyone." "On Earth," she whispered, and fired her last missile. The cascade failure that followed was spectacular. The alien dreadnought's massive weapons powered down one by one as electrical fires spread through its systems. The ship did not explode, but it was effectively removed from the battle. "Sir, we have lost 3 cruisers and 1 dreadnought," Valtar reported, his voice tight with stress. "Human losses are also heavy, but they continue to fight with damaged ships and reduced crews." Zexthara walked to the main viewing window and stared out at the battle. Everywhere he looked, he saw the same impossible sight. Human ships that should have been destroyed hours ago were still fighting. Crews that should have evacuated were staying at their posts even as their ships burned around them. "This does not make sense," the general muttered. "They are losing. They must know they are losing. Why do they not surrender?" As if in answer to his question, one of the human ships opened a communication channel. The image that appeared on his screen was shocking. The human captain was clearly dying, blood covering his uniform and face. Behind him, the ship's bridge was a wreck of twisted metal and sparking electronics. But the man was still giving orders to his crew. "This is Captain Ben Rodriguez of the U.S. Hornet," the human said, his voice weak but determined. "We have lost engines, weapons, and life support. Half my crew is dead. But we are still here, and we are still fighting." Rodriguez looked directly at the camera, and Zexthara saw something in the human's eyes that he had never seen before in any enemy. It was not fear or desperation, it was pure, unbreakable will. "You want to know why we keep fighting?" Rodriguez continued. "Because surrender is not in our nature. Because freedom is worth dying for. Because as long as one human draws breath, we will never stop protecting what we love." The communication ended, but moments later Zexthara watched as Rodriguez's ship somehow managed to fire one last shot, using what appeared to be the ship's own reactor as an improvised weapon. The energy beam struck another hegemony cruiser, causing critical damage for the first time in 3 centuries of warfare. General Zexthara began to doubt that he would win this battle. 6 hours had passed since the battle began, and General Zexthara could not understand what was happening. His fleet had started with 400 ships, more than enough to destroy any resistance. Now he had lost almost 50 vessels, and the humans were still fighting with a fury that made no sense. "Sir, we need to discuss our tactical situation," Commander Veltar said quietly, approaching the general's command chair. His voice carried a tone that Zexthara had never heard before. It sounded like worry. "What is there to discuss?" Zexthara replied, though his confidence was not as strong as it had been that morning. "We still outnumber them 10-1. Victory is inevitable." Veltar activated his datapad and showed the battle statistics to his commander. "Sir, our casualty rates are 3 times higher than any previous engagement. The humans have destroyed or disabled 47 of our ships. In return, we have eliminated 31 of their original 37 vessels." "Then we are winning," Zexthara said, but the words felt hollow. 6 human ships cannot defeat our remaining fleet. That is the problem, sir, Valtar continued. Those 6 ships are not acting like defeated enemies. They are fighting harder now than when they had full strength. And sir, we are receiving strange reports from across the battle zone. The general turned to face his aide. What kind of reports? Our ships are being attacked by debris, sir. The humans are somehow turning the wreckage of their destroyed vessels into guided weapons. They are using pieces of their own dead ships to damage our hulls. Zexthara stared at the tactical display, trying to understand what his aide was telling him. That is impossible. Debris cannot be controlled without sophisticated guidance systems. Apparently it can, sir. Watch this. Veltar activated a recording from one of their patrol ships. The image showed a human fighter that had been cut in half by an energy beam. The pilot should have been dead. But somehow the front section of the fighter was still moving under power, steering itself toward an alien destroyer. The recording showed the damaged fighter strike the destroyer's communication array, destroying the alien ship's ability to coordinate with the rest of the fleet. What made it even more disturbing was that the human pilot was clearly visible through the broken cockpit window, manually controlling his dying ship until the moment of impact. The pilot stayed conscious and kept fighting even after his ship was cut in half, Veltar explained. Intelligence estimates he had maybe 30 seconds of life support remaining, but he used every second to cause maximum damage to our forces. Colonel Ryan Hayes had been coordinating the human defense from Orbital Station Delta 7 for the past 4 hours. The station had lost life support 2 hours ago when an alien energy beam punched through the main hull. Now Hayes and his team worked in emergency suits, their fingers numb from cold, but they never stopped transmitting tactical information to the surviving human ships. Control to all remaining vessels. Hayes spoke into his radio, his breath visible as frost in the freezing air of the station. Enemy formation Charlie 9 is moving to flank position. Recommend immediate evasive action. His communication officer, a young woman named Kelly Brooks, looked up from her console. Sir, we are running low on power. Life support has been offline for hours, and the heating system failed 20 minutes ago. Should we consider evacuation? Hayes looked around at his team. 12 people working in a frozen metal box in space, surrounded by the vacuum of death, but still doing their jobs. Brooks, how many human ships are still out there fighting? 6 confirmed active vessels, sir. Plus maybe a dozen small fighters and reconnaissance craft? And how many people are on those ships? Brooks checked her display. Approximately 2,000 personnel, sir. Hayes nodded slowly. 2,000 people are out there right now, fighting impossible odds to protect Earth. They are dying to give our families one more day of life. As long as they keep fighting, we keep working. No exceptions. The station shook as another alien energy beam passed close by, but nobody moved from their stations. They had work to do. Captain Kate Sullivan floated in the wreckage of her fighter, the Stinger. The small craft had been hit by an alien interceptor missile 15 minutes ago, and now it was just a hollow shell drifting through space. Her life support system showed 8 minutes of oxygen remaining, but Sullivan was not thinking about dying. She was thinking about the 3 alien squadrons moving toward the remaining human battleship. Control, this is Stinger 7, she transmitted. On her suit radio, I have visual contact with enemy Squadron Alpha 3. They are moving to attack the Yorktown from below. Copy that, Stinger 7, came the reply from Hayes on the orbital station. Can you relay targeting data? Sullivan looked at her suit's simple display screen. It was not designed for military targeting, but it had a basic rangefinder and compass. Affirmative, Control. Enemy lead ship bearing 270, range approximately 5,000 meters. They appear to be charging their main weapons. Understood. Relaying to Yorktown now. Sullivan continued to broadcast targeting information as her oxygen supply dwindled. She could see the alien ships clearly through her helmet visor, and she used her suit's small maneuvering thrusters to adjust her position for better observation angles. With 4 minutes of air left, she spotted something important. Control. Enemy ships are clustering around what appears to be a command vessel. Large ship, different design from the others. If someone could hit it, it might disrupt their coordination. Roger that, Stinger 7. Outstanding work. Sullivan smiled as she watched the human battleship adjust its aim and fire a concentrated barrage at the alien command ship. The enemy vessel exploded in a bright flash, and the remaining alien ships scattered in confusion. She had 2 minutes of oxygen left when she saw another group of enemy fighters approaching from a different direction. Without hesitation, she began transmitting new targeting data. The thing that disturbed General Zexthara most was not the human weapons or their tactics. It was their coordination. Despite losing most of their fleet, despite having their command ships destroyed, despite operating with broken communication systems, the humans continued to work together like a single organism. "Sir, we have intercepted human communications," the intelligence officer reported. "They are using their personal emergency radios to share tactical information. Individual pilots are acting as spotters for ships they cannot even see." "How is that possible?" Zexthara demanded. "Personal emergency radios have a range of only a few kilometers. They are relaying messages, sir. One pilot sends information to another, who passes it to a third, who transmits it to a ship. They have created a communication network using dozens of individual radios." Zexthara studied the tactical display and realized something that chilled him to his core. The humans were not just fighting randomly. Every attack, every sacrifice, every desperate maneuver was part of a larger plan. They were losing ships and people, but each loss served a purpose. "Commander Veltar, show me our current formation," he ordered. The display zoomed out to show the positions of all remaining ships. What Zexthara saw made his blood run cold. Over the past 6 hours, the human attacks had not been random at all. They had been systematically destroying specific ships, targeting vessels in precise locations. The result was that his fleet, which had started in a perfect attack formation, was now scattered and disorganized. The humans had identified the key: ships that maintained formation integrity and had sacrificed themselves to eliminate those targets. "Sir, they have been fighting a strategic battle from the beginning," Veltar said quietly. "Every ship they sacrificed, every pilot who died, it was all planned to disrupt our formation and reduce our combat effectiveness." The communication officer suddenly called out from his station. "General, we are receiving a transmission from the human battleship Yorktown." "Put it on screen," Zexthara ordered. Though he was beginning to dread what he might see, the image that appeared showed the bridge of the human battleship. The ship was clearly damaged, with smoke and sparks visible in the background. But the human captain, a woman named Patricia Evans, stood straight and calm at her command station. "General Zexthara," Evans said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her, "I wanted to thank you for the tactical lesson you have provided today." "What lesson?" Zexthara found himself asking. Evans smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "You have shown us exactly how your ships move, how your weapons work, and how your commanders think. We have been recording everything, analyzing your tactics and technology. This battle has been the most valuable intelligence-gathering operation in human history." The general felt a chill run through his body. "You are defeated. Your fleet is destroyed." "Our first fleet is destroyed," Evans corrected. "But you should know something about humans, General. We learn from every mistake, and we never fight the same battle twice. The next time we meet, we will be ready for you." As if summoned by her words, the long-range sensors began detecting new contacts at the edge of the solar system. Hundreds of them moving fast toward the battle zone. The human reinforcements were arriving, and they were coming to finish what the first fleet had started. The reinforcements that appeared on the edge of the solar system were nothing like the ships General Zexthara had been fighting for the past 8 hours. These new human vessels moved with deadly purpose, their formations tight and coordinated. Worse yet, they seemed to know exactly where his ships were and what weapons they carried. "Sir, the incoming human fleet consists of 230 vessels," Commander Veltar reported, his voice tight with stress. "They are moving directly toward our position at maximum speed." 200 ships, Zexthara muttered, staring at the tactical display. We still outnumber them. We have 350 ships remaining. Sir, there is something else, Veltar continued. The new human ships are different from the ones we have been fighting. They appear to have upgraded armor and weapons. Intelligence suggests they have modified their designs based on what they learned during today's battle. General Zexthara felt something he had not experienced in 3 centuries of warfare. Fear, not the simple worry of a difficult battle, but the deep, cold fear that came from facing an enemy that might actually be superior. These humans had used their first fleet as a learning tool, gathering information about hegemony, technology, and tactics while their people died. The first wave of new human ships entered weapons range, and immediately Zexthara knew this would be different. Instead of charging forward like the earlier human vessels, these ships moved in complex patterns, staying just outside the effective range of hegemony weapons while pounding the alien fleet with long-range fire. Captain Mike Turner commanded the lead human battleship, the UES Retribution. His ship had been built in the orbital shipyards of Mars, constructed with everything humanity had learned about alien technology over the past 8 hours. The armor was angled to deflect energy beams, the weapons were designed to target the weak points his people had died to discover, and the engines could outrun anything in the hegemony fleet. All ships, this is Turner, he broadcast to the human fleet. Remember the lessons our brothers and sisters taught us with their blood? Target their weapon systems first, then their engines. Avoid their forward firing arcs and stay mobile. Make every shot count. The human fleet moved like a pack of wolves, attacking in coordinated groups while avoiding direct confrontation with the larger alien ships. They had learned that hegemony vessels were powerful but slow to turn, and they used this knowledge to stay in the enemy's blind spots. Admiral Jake Murphy watched the battle from his damaged flagship, the UES Constitution. His ship had lost most of its weapons and could barely move, but it was still transmitting tactical data to the new arrivals. Murphy himself was badly injured, with bandages covering burns on his arms and face, but he refused to leave his command. Station. Sir, the new fleet is requesting updated tactical information, his communication officer reported. Send them everything we have, Murphy ordered. Ship configurations, weapon ranges, shield frequencies, command protocols. Every piece of data we gathered during this fight needs to get to them immediately. Murphy turned to address his remaining crew, most of whom were wounded but still working. People, we have done our job. We held the line long enough for the cavalry to arrive. Now we need to make sure they have every advantage we can give them. The Admiral opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet, both the survivors of the first battle and the newcomers. This is Admiral Murphy to all human vessels. 8 hours ago, we faced an enemy we had never seen before, using weapons we did not understand. Many of our friends have died today, but their sacrifice was not wasted. We have learned how these aliens fight, and now we are going to teach them how humans fight when they are prepared. On the alien flagship, General Zexthara watched his tactical display with growing horror. The new human ships were systematically dismantling his fleet. They avoided his strongest weapons while targeting his weakest points. They moved in patterns that made it almost impossible for his ships to get clear shots, while constantly hammering his forces with precise fire. Sir, we have lost 60 ships in the past hour, Veltar reported. Our casualties are mounting faster than we can respond. How is this possible? Zexthara demanded. Their technology is still inferior to ours. Their ships are smaller and weaker. Sir, they are not fighting the same way, the tactical officer explained. The first human fleet fought with courage but limited knowledge. These new ships are fighting with both courage and complete understanding of our capabilities. They know exactly where to hit us and how to avoid our return fire. Captain Sarah Mitchell piloted her fighter, the Wasp, through a swarm of alien interceptors. Her small craft was faster and more agile than anything the aliens had, and she used that advantage to devastating effect. Mitchell had studied the battle recordings from the first wave and knew exactly how alien pilots thought and reacted. "Control, this is Wasp 1, she transmitted. "I have 12 enemy fighters in pursuit, leading them toward the asteroid field." "Copy." "Wasp 1, be careful in there." Mitchell smiled grimly as she dove toward a cluster of space rocks that orbited near Earth's moon. The alien pilots followed her, just as she had expected. What they did not know was that human engineers had spent the last 8 hours placing weapons platforms throughout the asteroid field, hidden among the rocks. As the alien fighters entered the trap, automated defense systems opened fire from dozens of concealed positions. The enemy pilots, focused on chasing Mitchell, flew directly into the crossfire. Within minutes, all 12 alien fighters were destroyed. "Control, this is Wasp 1. Trap worked perfectly." "Enemy squadron eliminated." "Outstanding work, Wasp 1. Return to formation?" Similar scenes played out across the battlefield as human forces used their new knowledge to deadly effect. Every tactic the aliens employed had been studied and countered. Every weapon system had been analyzed and a defense developed. The humans had turned their earlier defeat into a comprehensive education in alien warfare. Commander Veltar approached General Zexthara with the latest casualty reports. "Sir, we have now lost over 100 ships. Our formation integrity is completely broken and several of our command vessels have been destroyed. What about their losses?" Zexthara asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Minimal, sir. They have lost perhaps 20 ships, and most of those were damaged. Vessels from the first battle that were already beyond repair." General Zexthara stared out the viewing window at the battle raging around his flagship. Everywhere he looked, he saw hegemony ships burning or drifting dead in space. The humans had turned the tables completely, and now his forces were the ones being systematically destroyed. "Sir, we are receiving a priority transmission from the human flagship," the communication officer announced. "Put it on screen," Zexthara ordered. Admiral Murphy appeared on the main display, looking tired but determined. Behind him, the bridge of his ship showed the scars of battle, but his crew was still working efficiently. "General Zexthara," Murphy said, his voice carrying across the void between their ships. "I want you to understand something about humans that you clearly did not know when you came here." "What is that?" Zexthara found himself asking. Murphy leaned forward in his command chair, his eyes hard as steel. "Humans do not just fight wars. General, we study them, we learn from them. We turn every defeat into a lesson and every lesson into a weapon. You came here thinking you were facing primitives with simple weapons and simple minds." The Admiral gestured toward the tactical display that showed the ongoing battle. "What you actually faced was a species that has been perfecting the art of warfare for 10,000 years. A species that treats every conflict as a learning experience. You gave us 8 hours to study your tactics, your technology, and your weaknesses. That was the biggest mistake you could have made." Murphy's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "General, I'm going to offer you something we have never offered to any aggressor. I'm going to give you one chance to withdraw your forces and leave this system. Not because we fear you, but because we respect the courage of soldiers, even enemy soldiers." The communication paused for a moment, and Murphy's face became deadly serious. "But understand this, General. If you refuse this offer, if you choose to continue this fight, we will destroy every single ship in your fleet. We have the knowledge, we have the weapons, and we have the will to do it. The choice is yours." General Zexthara stared at the screen long after the transmission ended. For the first time in his long military career, he was facing an enemy that might actually be superior to the galactic hegemony. These humans had done something no other species had ever managed. They had turned their own defeat into victory, and they had done it in less than 1 day. The general looked around his command center, seeing the fear in the eyes of his officers. He looked at the tactical display showing his fleet being steadily destroyed by an enemy that had seemed primitive just hours before. And for the first time in 3 centuries, General Zexthara began to consider the possibility of retreat. General Zextara stood in silence for 10 long minutes after Admiral Murphy's offer. Around him, his command crew waited for orders while reports of more ship losses came in every few seconds. The tactical display showed the truth that no one wanted to speak aloud. The Galactic Hegemony fleet was being destroyed by an enemy they had thought was primitive. "Sir, we need to make a decision," Commander Veltar said quietly. "We have lost 140 ships in the past 2 hours. At this rate, the entire fleet will be destroyed within 6 hours." Zexthara looked at his oldest friend and most trusted officer. Veltar had served with him through dozens of campaigns, and they had never lost a single battle together. Now, they were facing not just defeat, but complete annihilation. "What would you recommend, old friend?" the general asked. Veltar glanced around the command center, making sure no other officers could hear. "Sir, these humans are not like any enemy we have ever faced. They learn faster than we can adapt. They turn their defeats into victories. If we continue this fight, none of us will survive to return home." "You are suggesting retreat?" "I am suggesting that we live to fight another day, sir. The hegemony needs to know what we have learned here. These humans are not a client species waiting to be conquered. They are a warrior race that has spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war." As if to prove Veltar's point, another explosion rocked the flagship as human fighters struck the ship's secondary weapon systems. The lights flickered and several control consoles sparked and went dark. "Sir, direct hit to sections 7 and 12, the damage control officer reported. "We have lost main communications and backup navigation." General Zexthara walked to the main viewing window and stared out at the battle. In the distance, he could see a human battleship destroying one of his heavy cruisers. The alien ship, which should have been able to defeat 3 human vessels, was being taken apart piece by enemies who knew exactly where to hit it. "Open a channel to Admiral Murphy," Zexthara ordered. The communication officer looked surprised but followed the order. Moments later, Murphy's face appeared on the main screen. The human admiral looked tired but alert, and his eyes showed no. "Mercy, Admiral Murphy, this is General Zexthara." "I'm prepared to discuss your offer," Murphy nodded slowly. "I am listening, General. You spoke of respect for soldiers. Do you truly mean that, or is it just human propaganda?" The human admiral was quiet for a moment before answering. "General, I have fought in many wars, but I have never enjoyed killing. Every soldier who dies today, human or alien, is someone's son or daughter. They have families who love them and dreams they will never fulfill. War is sometimes necessary, but death should never be celebrated." Zexthara found himself believing the human's words. There was something in Murphy's voice that spoke of genuine sadness for the lives lost on both sides. "If I order my fleet to withdraw, what assurance do I have that you will not attack us as we retreat?" "You have my word as a soldier and as a human being," Murphy replied immediately. "Withdraw your forces from this system, and we will not pursue. But understand this, General. If any hegemony ship ever returns to threaten Earth or any human colony, we will show no mercy." General Zexthara turned to look at his command crew. These were good soldiers who had served the hegemony faithfully for decades. They deserved to see their homes again, to tell their families about the strange and terrible humans they had encountered. "Very well, Admiral Murphy, I accept your terms." Zexthara straightened his shoulders and spoke with as much dignity as he could manage. "All hegemony ships will withdraw immediately from this system and will not return." "Understood, General. You have 1 hour to collect any survivors and begin your retreat." The communication ended, and Zexthara turned to face his officers. "All ships, this is General Zexthara. We are withdrawing from the Sol system immediately. Collect any survivors you can find and prepare for immediate departure." As his fleet began the humiliating process of retreat, Zexthara made a decision that would have shocked anyone who knew him. He walked to his personal quarters and began writing his resignation letter. The letter was addressed to the Hegemony High Command, but Zexthara knew it would be read by every military leader in the galaxy. He wrote carefully, choosing each word to convey the full impact of what he had witnessed. "To the Supreme Council of the Galactic Hegemony," he began. I am writing to inform you of my immediate resignation from military service, effective upon the delivery of this message. I can no longer serve an organization that seeks to conquer a species like the humans of Earth. Zexthara paused in his writing, thinking about how to explain what had happened. How could he make them understand that the humans were not just another primitive species to be enslaved? The humans are not the weak primitives our intelligence report suggested. They are perhaps the most dangerous warrior species in the galaxy, not because of their technology, but because of their nature. They do not fight for conquest or glory. They fight for protection, for freedom, for love of their families and their way of life. He continued writing, describing the battle in detail. He explained how the humans had used their first fleet as a learning tool, gathering intelligence even as their people died. He wrote about their coordination, their refusal to surrender, and their ability to turn every defeat into a lesson for a future victory. Most importantly, Zexthara wrote, the humans possess something that the hegemony has forgotten in its centuries of easy conquest. They remember that every individual life has value. They fight not just to win, but to protect what they love. This makes them infinitely more dangerous than any enemy we have previously faced. The general sealed the letter and transmitted it to hegemony headquarters. Then he made another decision that surprised even himself. He sent a second message, this one to Admiral Murphy. Admiral, this is General Zexthara. I want you to know that I am resigning my commission with the hegemony military. I can no longer serve an organization that seeks to destroy species like yours. I have a request to make, and I understand if you refuse it. Murphy's image appeared on the communication screen, his expression curious. What is your request, General? I would like permission to come to Earth, not as a conqueror or a spy, but as a student. I have spent 3 centuries believing that military might was the highest form of civilization. Today you have shown me that there is something higher. You have shown me that the greatest warriors are those who fight to protect, not to conquer. The human admiral studied Zexthara's face for a long moment. General, you would be willing to give up everything you have known to come and live among your former enemies? Admiral, I have learned today that you are not my enemies. You are what I should have been striving to become all along. You are warriors in service of something greater than yourselves. Murphy was quiet for several minutes, and Zexthara could see him discussing the request with his officers. Finally, the human admiral returned to the screen. General Zexthara, the United Earth Council will need to approve your request, but I will recommend that it be granted. Any soldier brave enough to admit when he was wrong and wise enough to want to learn from his mistakes deserves a chance at redemption. 3 months later, former General Zexthara stood in a small apartment in New York City, watching the news coverage of the memorial service for the human defenders who had died in the battle. He had been granted asylum on Earth, and he spent his days learning about human culture, history, and philosophy. The memorial service was being broadcast around the world, and Zexthara watched as Admiral Murphy spoke to the assembled crowd. The human admiral stood before a wall bearing the names of everyone who had died defending Earth, and his words carried across the planet. We did not fight because we wanted war, Murphy said, his voice strong and clear. We fought because we wanted peace. We fought because we know that freedom is not free, and that sometimes the only way to protect what we love is to be willing to sacrifice everything for it. Murphy gestured toward the names on the memorial wall. These brave men and women understood that the greatest victory is not defeating your enemy, but protecting your family. They knew that the strongest weapon is not hatred, but love. They died so that others might live in freedom. Zexthara nodded, finally understanding what made humans so different from every other species in the galaxy. They had learned to turn their capacity for violence into a tool for protection. They had mastered the art of war not because they loved destruction, but because they loved life. That evening, Zexthara began writing his memoirs. The first chapter was titled, "The Day I Learned That the Greatest Warriors Fight for Love, Not Glory." He hoped that someday other members of the galactic hegemony would read his words and understand what he had learned from the humans of Earth. In a galaxy full of conquerors, the humans stood apart as protectors. And in learning this lesson, a former general had found something he had never expected to find. He had found a new purpose and perhaps a new home.